Hello and welcome, and this episode has a decidedly mini flavour to it. If you want to know about a little Scamp, then stay tuned. But first, although not strictly a kit car, this is the car that influenced the kits that we're going to be talking about. So, here's the story of the Mini Moke. The Mini Moke is a front-wheel drive utility and recreation vehicle, conceived and manufactured as a lightweight military vehicle by British Motor Corporation and subsequently marketed for civilian use under the Austin, Morris, Leyland and Moke brands. The name Mini Moke combines the mini with moke, an archaic term for mule. The Moke is known for its simple, straightforward, doorless design and for its adaptability. BMC's Cowley plant started building Mokes in January 1964 with 14,518 produced in the UK between 1964 and 1968. A further 26,000 were manufactured in Australia between 1966 and 1981, and 10,000 in Portugal between 1980 and 1993, when, after nearly 30-year run, production ended. In 2013, a joint venture with Jaguar Land Rover, Chinese automaker Chery Automobile, started production in China of a new car called Moke. This version of the design is assembled and distributed by a number of companies in several countries, including the UK, France, and the US, although ownership of the Moke name is disputed. The original Moke was designed by Sir Alec Isigonis and John Shepherd. When Isigonis designed the Mini, he planned another vehicle to share the Mini's mechanical parts, but with a more rugged body shell. This was an attempt to take a portion of the military vehicle business from Land Rover, which was then a separate company. Isigonis had previously designed the Nuffield Guppy, a failed attempt to break into the market. By 1959, BMC had worked on prototypes of what was codenamed the Buckboard, later to become the Mini Moke. These prototypes were shown to the British Army as a parachute droppable vehicle, but poor ground clearance and a low-powered engine did not meet the most basic requirements for an off-road vehicle. Only the Royal Navy showed any interest in the Buckboard as a vehicle for use on the decks of aircraft carriers. Early promotional vehicle made much of the lightness of the vehicle, showing 4 soldiers travelling in the Moke off-road and then picking it up by its tubular bumpers and carrying it when, inevitably, its low ground clearance proved inadequate. In a further attempt to make a viable military vehicle, a few four-wheel drive Mokes were made. This was accomplished with the addition of a second engine and transmission at the back of the vehicle with linked clutches and gear shifters, which did nothing for the ground clearance problems, but it did make for quite a difficult drive. This vehicle was called the Twinny and was shown to the US Army, again with no success. The added mechanical complexity and lack of interest by the military discouraged the development beyond the prototype stage. 3 of these vehicles were used by the Brazilian Army after being captured during the 1969 Rupuni rebellion from Guyanese rebels who had crossed the borders into Brazil. During the Rhodesian Bush War, there was an attempt by the Rhodesian security forces to create an armoured Moke as an improvised fighting vehicle, which was seemingly unsuccessful. Original prototypes using the engine, transmission and suspension parts from the Mini van, the designed small wheels and low ground clearance made it unsuitable as an off-road military vehicle. The design therefore was subsequently adapted and sold globally for general use as a low-cost, easy maintained, lightweight recreational and utility vehicle. When BMC gave up on the idea of selling the Moke to the military in 1963, they marketed it as a civilian vehicle, targeting farmers and light commercial applications. Several prototypes were built in 1963, one of which is still known to exist in Pinner, just outside London in England. The Moke was launched onto the British market in 1964. The British Customs and Excise Department decided that the Moke should be classified as a passenger car rather than a commercial vehicle, which meant that it attracted purchase tax, reducing sales in its intended commercial market. British-made Mokes were fitted with the low-end 848cc transverse inline-4 A-series engine. Detuned to use low-octane fuel, they used the same suspension gearbox and 10-inch wheels as the standard Mini. Originally, passenger seats, grab handles, heater, windscreen washer and removable canvas top were optional equipment installed by the owner. The base price was £405. The Mark I Mokes had a single windscreen wiper and a floor-mounted headlight dip switch, and the only colour available was spruce green. In 1967, the Mark II Moke added a passenger side wiper. Horn and headlamp controls were moved into the indicator stalk. These later British Mokes were also available in white. The John Player and Sons Cigarette Company ran a team of Mokes in autocross competitions on grass tracks through 1968. These vehicles were equipped with rollover protection and used the Mini Cooper's 1275cc engine. Despite the lack of success in selling the Moke to the British Armed Forces, an unknown number, unlikely to have been more than a handful of examples, were apparently used by the land forces of the Falkland Islands during the Falkland War and its immediate aftermath. The source of these vehicles is unclear. At least one commandeered civilian Mini Moke was also used by the Argentinian forces during their occupation of the islands. The original Moke was made in Britain until 1968. Australian production of the Moke ended in 1981. As Australian Moke production wound down, manufacturing transferred to British Leyland subsidiary in Portugal, which made 8,500 of the Californian Mokes between 1980 and 84. In 1984, production was transferred to the Vendos Novus plant. Initially, these Mokes were identical to the late model Australian Mokes. Very soon, however, they were altered to use then-current British production Mini saloon components, including the standard length Mini rear trailing arms and the 12-inch wheels with modern low-profile tyres, which the saloon had acquired during the Moke's absence from Europe. In April 1990, British Leyland, by then called the Rover Group, sold the Moke name to Cagiva, a motorcycle manufacturer in Bologna, Italy. Production continued in Portugal under Cagiva's auspices until 1993, when Cagiva transferred the tooling to their own factory in Varese, Italy, with the intention of restarting production there in 1995, which they never actually did. Although some unfinished cars were assembled in Italy, Cagiva was made to pay a considerably higher price for the Rover-made parts than BL's Portuguese subsidiary, and the enterprise never made financial sense. The Cagiva-built Mokes have a new top with C-shaped openings, as well as plastic curved handles at the rear longitudinal elements of the rollover bar. Since Cagiva did not own the Mini name, the 2,071 cars they built were sold only as Mokes. and this brought the total production run of Mokes and Moke derivatives to a total of about 50,000 in all. The Moke's construction is simple. The body mainly consists of two box-section pontoons or side boxes running between the front and rear wheels, and includes solid extensions running from the back of the car to the front, and these are connected by the floor pan, the firewall and the sturdy lateral torque box that runs under the front seats and stiffens the body in torsion. The left-hand pontoon contains the fuel tank, the right hand has a compartment for the battery and a small lockable storage area. The 1972 Moke Special Export, commonly referred to as the Californian Moke, has an Austin Sprite NG midget type fuel tank fitted beneath the rear floor area to meet the American FMVSS safety requirements of the time. Standard Mokes of the same period and later Californian Mokes used the conventional tank mounted in the left side box. Later Portuguese Mokes have additional lockable storage space at the rear of the vehicle. Optional cloth canopy has plastic side windows and is held up by thin tubular structure that can easily be removed when not needed. In later versions, this was replaced with a more solid roll cage. The windscreen can easily be unbolted and removed if not needed. There are just 3 curved panels in the Moke: the bonnet, the firewall and the floor, each of which is only curved in one direction. This makes it relatively straightforward to reproduce and replace Moke body components without access to sophisticated machine tools. Because the Moke's Mini A-Series engine, manual gearbox and suspension are identical to those of the Mini, which was still in production up until October 2000, most spare parts are still readily available. The Moke has no chassis as such, so the wheels, brake assemblies and suspension are attached to the front and rear subframes, bolted straight into the monocoque shell, just as with the standard Mini. Mokes tend to require much structural maintenance if they are to stay in good running order. The box sections in particular are prone to rust. The Moke attracted attention via media exposure, including the 1965 John Boorman film Catch Us If You Can, in which the Moke was driven by the Dave Clark 5. Many appearances in television series The Prisoner, starring Patrick McGoohan from 1967 to 68, as well as in popular songs such as the English rock group's Traffic's recording of Berkshire Poppies. The Moke was also featured in several James Bond films: You Only Live Twice, Live and Let Die, The Spy Who Loved Me and Moonraker, as well as the films Emmanuel, Carry On Camping and the Doctor Who story Fury from the Deep. In total, the Moke has made cameo appearances in over 70 films. The Beatles and the Beach Boys were also photographed behind the wheel of a Moke. Despite these cultural references and celebrity associations, only about a tenth of the 14,500 British-produced Mokes were sold in the United Kingdom, although Mokes continued to be made in Britain until 1968. The Moke met with renewed success in the 1980s after French actress and model Brigitte Bardot was pictured driving a Moke with her dogs in Saint-Tropez in France. In 1982, the Seychelles issued a commemorative transportation postage stamp featuring the Mini Moke. In 2016, the Moke was also included in an exhibition titled Owl Projects with Aluminium, curated by Maria Cristina D'Addario at the Grand Hormo in Belgium. The show explored experimentation with aluminium in art, design and industry. So that rounds off our look into the history of the Mini Moke. So the Moke lasted longer than most British people realise because it went out of production here in 1968, but carried on in Australia, then Portugal, and for a short while in Italy. But here we're going to talk about a car that outlasted even the Moke because it's still in production today, and that car is the Scamp. The Scamp is a truly classic kit car that outlived both its Moke inspiration and many kit-based competitors to boot. So what's the secret of its success? What made the Scamp stand out? And how did it manage such a long and continuing lifespan? Robert Mandry, from his base in Reading, Berkshire, designed and built the first Mark I Scamps in 1969. These early models were inspired by the Mini Moke and utilised the mechanical parts of the classic Mini. Scamp was conceived as a versatile, all-purpose vehicle that could serve both the commercial and leisure functions, much like the Moke inspiration. Here's a timeline of key developments. The body was constructed using metal box section frame and aluminium panels, paired with the running gear of a classic Mini. This simple but rugged principle meant that it was ideal for farmers and small businessmen for whom the ability to take a few knocks and scrapes was ideal. It also tapped into the leisure market, with the Moke going out of production shortly after the Moke was introduced. The Scamp appealed to those who could no longer buy the BMC original. Before long, the Scamp built up its own steady following, and sales were steady, if not spectacular, through the 1970s. In 1978, the Mark II version was launched, featuring a squarer body design and more robust chassis, no longer relying on the Mini's rear subframe. This was ideally placed in a market that was about to explode. With the first kit car magazines from pioneer Peter Philby promoting the industry and mainstream manufacturers becoming ever more conservative, kit car companies were to enter a boom period going into the 1980s. Having an established name, good reputation and enthusiastic customer base stood the company in good stead, and the Mark II found a lot of eager customers. The customizable nature of Scamps meant that nearly every car is different, with owners having a wide range of options for engines, chassis configurations including 4 or 6 wheels, long or short wheelbases, body styles, van, estate and pickup and other modifications were available. By now, nostalgia for the long out-of-production Moke was being fueled by repeats of 60s action series like The Prisoner. Several rivals joined the fray as the kit market expanded, but the Scamp had longevity. It was a well-proven product and was seen as the established benchmark that others would be judged against. By 1983, the number of kit car shows in the UK was growing. Owners' clubs, including the enthusiastic Scamp Owners Club, would put on impressive displays. Potential customers would see the cars on trade stands and then see the customer-built examples in the clubs outside. The clubs added to support and sales grew again. This happy combination, along with favourable magazine reviews, made this the high point for the Scamp. In 1987, Scamp manufacturing and ownership were taken over by Andrew McLean, a Scamp enthusiast. Andrew further cemented the long bond the company had with the Owners Club, with annual get-togethers seeing the cars enjoyed off-road. Production moved to East Grinstead in Sussex and later to Rowfant, Crawley in Sussex. 1988 he launched the Mark III version, a slightly less square version than the Mark II, with demonstrators appearing at Kitcars and Mini magazines. The Mark III GT Scamp was featured in Top Gear magazine, further proving the wider recognition the Kitcar industry was enjoying at the time. I filmed one of the Owners Club meets for my Kits and Cruising TV series on Men and Motors, almost being bounced out the back of a Mark III driven enthusiastically by my presenter up a muddy bank. At the time, Scamp competitors were falling by the wayside, IVA striking fear into many kitcar companies due to the cost of making cars compliant. The biggest problem for the Moke-alikes was the requirement to have radiused edges rather than any shortfall in build quality or safety issues with their strong chassis. However, the Scamp had 2 decades of production under its belt. Andrew had a steady stream of work supplying spares and replacement parts, and one loophole in the IVA was the ability to sidestep it completely if you rebodied an existing rolling chassis. Small Japanese off-roaders like the Suzuki SJ and Daihatsu F50 and F55 had rusting steel bodies on top of sturdy ladder chassis, but were very popular with farmers. Post-1988, Scamp expanded its range to include 4x4 versions based on these Suzuki SJ or Daihatsu F50 or F55 chassis. This gave a new lease of life to Suzuki and Daihatsu owners and gave the Scamp a larger model with even more ability. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, Andrew McLean continued to look after and nurture the Scamp's legacy, supporting the owners and long outliving many rivals from the 1980s. In 2011, the Scamp Motor Company acquired the manufacturing rights for the Rough Terrain Vehicle, or RTV, another mini-based vehicle originally designed by Robert Mandry. First shown in 1983 after a very detailed development period, it is a very clever design, turning the drivetrain through 90 degrees and a driveshaft passing through the special hinge in the middle of the vehicle that allows the front and rear to twist in opposite directions with live axles at both ends fed by the mid-mounted mini engine and gearbox. In November 2024, after 37 years in charge, Andrew McLean sold the Scamp company to a new ownership group comprising of Matt Parker and Robin Waite. They are committed to continue the Scamp legacy and plan to launch a Mark IV 4J model based on the Suzuki Jimny chassis in 2025. They also have plans for a Mark V in the future, thus ensuring the future of this classic British marque. So the Moke inspired the Scamp, but both the Moke and the Scamp inspired a lot of other kits. So here's another example of a mini-based utility.
My name's Steve Hull, editor of TKC Mag and TotalKitcar.com. It's a nice little one, this. It's not a massively long one. Hopefully it'll be entertaining. And there's a bit of humour in this one as well, I think. Well, I do try and have a bit of humour, but this company I'm going to be talking about certainly had some interesting facts, or well, anecdotes attached to them. But the company was called Ranger Automotive, although I think they began life as EJS products, I think. But just a quick sort of footnote, really. They were one of these companies, I think, that they were around in sort of mid-70s. Really was their prime. And they were one of the companies that existed at the time that they did, before and subsequent. We probably all can name a few that were always there, always offered a decent product. Went to most shows, never managed to get the sales figures perhaps that arguably they might have deserved, or were indeed taken seriously enough to be considered as being one of the top players. I've driven a few of this company's products, but I was not, even at my age, I wasn't around. Well, mid-70s, I couldn't even drive, so I didn't actually visit the company in period. Although I've read plenty of stuff about the company boss, a chap called Eric Sammons, to to give me an informed opinion on just what sort of a pleasant, charming little company they were, really. And I mean that in the best sense of the word. They were an honest to goodness company that worked hard. Had a couple of, made a few cars actually, but had a couple really that dented the sales charts of the kit car world. Um, Without really sort of, I don't know, making a dent, as I say, on the top, making their presence felt on the top table, shall we say. Anyway, they they began life in 1971. Actually, they were best known really for mini base kits, but the first product they produced, and interestingly, it was their best seller, was a little thing called the Ranger 80, and that was a mini Moke inspired kit. Nothing unusual in that, of course, I hear you say, but it wasn't based on Mini, which is kind of ironic, given what the other cars were based on. They were using the Austin 1100 and Morris 1300. And that appeared in 1971, although they quickly changed their name in 72 to Ranger Automotive. It was, they actually were going to, this is an interesting little footnote for you, as another footnote, they were going to, the second model for the company was going to be a Ferrari Dino replica, but for whatever reason, Eric decided not to proceed with that one, and that would have put it right very early as a replica maker. So I'm not too sure what happened to that, but they sold 303 of them, which was a marvellous little return, and they did keep that going until I think 1976. It was resurrected in 1984 by a Welsh company, and I'm going to murder this pronunciation. I really am. I know I am. They were basing, and forgive me if we got some Welsh readers and listeners, I know, and Llangefni. Now forgive me, please forgive me, and I'm going to do another one. The guy who ran that company was called, now I'm almost embarrassed to say it, Semlin Williams, and I'm going to spell that Cemlyn. And again, 1,000 apologies if I've got anywhere sort of halfway to butchering that. But they took it over for a little while. I don't think they were around long, maybe 18 months, moving swiftly on. The car that Summons was best known for, and of which he sold 200, was the Ranger Cub. But before that, let's talk about where they were based, the company's headquarters, shall we say. They were originally, no too fine a point, on a bomb site second-hand car lot in Essex, but they moved to the. This is a great one. This I you know, I don't know. I make no comment other than to tell you what I know. They moved to a company, and their base was the old Corona Cinema in Leigh-on-Sea. And that place was allegedly haunted. Now, again, I make no comment on that, but that was the story doing the rounds at the time. I think Sammons was quick to perpetuate that story. Whether he saw that as being a way as a marketing tool, he could well have done. But he designed the Cub. Input from one of his employees, a guy called Alan White. Credit where that's due. It was based on Mini. 1.5-inch square tube space frame with half a mini subframe at the rear and a complete one at the front. And they also produced a pickup body style for that car. Incredibly low weight, 406 kilo. Well, below 406, because that kept it as it was a three-wheeler, obviously. Sorry, just didn't mention that. Three-wheeler, and for it to be classed as a motorcycle for tax purposes, it had to be below 406. Now, they had a feature actually on the Cub in Custom Car magazine, no less, and the report was quite memorable. And I've hooked out one quote, which is absolutely brilliant, as follows. Up front, it looks rather like a goldfish that just popped its dentures out for the night. Out back, it's like one of Colin Chapman's more disquieting hallucinations, which I think is hilarious. Cruel, but hilarious. And they also said it cornered like a hulled pirate ship, by the way. That series, the series one appeared in 1974, and they did about 20 before Salmons went, I think, after the custom car feature, went back to the drawing board and came up with a revised and slightly more visually pleasing Cub, Mark II, or Series 2 as he called it, and that came along in early 1975. Officially launched at that year's Midland Motorcycle Show at the NEC, actually. Excuse me. Optional extras included weather gear and, dare I say here, a floor for the boot. Yep, they sold a kit without a floor for the boot, but it was an optional extra. About 180 of the Series 2s were sold, and kits only cost 295 quid, which I know was a different world back then, but that still seems remarkably cheap. I did speak to someone that owned one of those, and he did say that the body roll was prodigious, and it did roll like a, I didn't say it was a whole pirate ship, but he didn't say it was particularly Caterham-like. I think some of those 200 sold were fitted with Cooper S engines. And I know that Eric, ahead of his time really, built an electric one, and that had, it must have weighed a ton, that though, because it had 15 Scamp locomotive tugger batteries about itself. But can't knock him for the endeavour really. There was a Cub 4, which is a four-wheeler, beg your pardon. Never caught on like the three-wheeled Cub. Salmons was reported as saying that a four-wheeled pickup version couldn't fail, but it did. Launched it at the London Speed Show at Crystal Palace in January 1975. Only 4 of those were made. The company's very enthusiastic agent, a guy in the Birmingham area called John Thomas, no jokes at the back please, had formerly worked at Broadspeed, so he knew his way around the toolbox for sure. He came up with quite a famous car for its time. You may have seen pictures in various mags over the years. It was a Ranger Cub with 6 wheels. Only one of those made, I believe. Yeah, I think that John Thomas actually was based in Furness End. There's no reason for me to laugh at the name John Thomas, but in, you know, fanar, schoolboy humour and all that. Actually, he could have made 2 of those. He could have made 2 of those actually, though, the 6-wheeler. But there was that, talking about that company whose name I'm not going to even try and repeat again. There was a one-off Austin 1100. They kind of worked on the Ranger 80, but made it more Jeep-like. And Mr. Williams produced one of those in about 1984, I think. And there we have the short but sweet story of Ranger Automotive. I hope you enjoyed that one. If you've got this far and you haven't pressed the quit button yet, and you haven't already subscribed, please consider doing so. It would mean the world to us, really, because unbelievably, we do put a bit of effort into these, and so it doesn't cost you a penny, and if you can, we'd really appreciate it. Many, many thanks.
Thank you for watching. Hope you've enjoyed the video. If you've reached this point, hopefully you did. Please give us a thumbs up. That tells people like us that there's something here that they'll enjoy. And if you want to be really fantastic, click on the bell and then click on the all option, and then you'll be told when new videos land. Until the next time, take care.